It would appear Godzilla does maths now, because Godzilla -1 just came out in cinemas. Yep, that is the best I've got. The best joke I could come up with. I, like a lot of people, enjoy monster movies. I don't know what it is, but big things going smashy smashy, I'll sit down and watch it. I'll have a good time. My experience of Godzilla films in that realm is very kind of Western oriented, right? I've seen all of the American ones, not many of the Japanese ones, you know, the OG, the better ones, let's call it what it is. So please bear that in mind with today's review. You know, I'm not a pro at this Godzilla thing. I'm just a dude that wanted to sit down and watch a good one of these things. And good one of these things, it most certainly was. Godzilla -1 delivers pretty much everything that I want to get from a Godzilla film. It's ticking the boxes left, right and centre. And I think part of the reason that it is as effective as it is in all of the departments that I'm going to end up chatting about here has to come down, firstly, I think for me and a lot of Western audiences here, to, I suppose, where Godzilla's ended up going in the American side of things. Last two Godzilla films, they weren't great, I'll be the first to say. I just sort of feel like it's lost a lot of actual gravitas and has just sort of become big CGI thing flopping around, punching each other. It's just sort of ended up becoming the same big blockbuster spectacle mess. And I don't know that I'm fully there for it. I'm not so much a fan of the whole kind of conspiracy side of things, the whole kind of secret evil corporation organization controlling things, and then lots of different kaijus coming up and fighting, especially in the sort of lens of the way it's been done in the Western films, as some other people might be. So for me, it felt refreshing almost to sit down and see a very kind of, I suppose, restrained Godzilla film, at least in terms of the scope of this story. I mean, this one is one Godzilla, one big monster, and a very sort of narrow range of characters. It's a very small circle, I suppose. I mean, there's lots of people in the film, but really it's just centering on this one guy and Godzilla. I make that sound like they're just, I don't know, going for tea together, and it's just like a buddy. They're not that friendly. But I did really love the way that director Takashi Yamazaki keeps things kind of focused, I suppose, in that sense. It sort of risks at a few places going bigger than maybe it had the realm to get away with, but overall it does a great job of sticking and focusing on a much more kind of, for lack of a better word, grounded story at its forefront. This one's set immediately after World War II in the 40s in Japan, and as such you can imagine that we're looking at Godzilla through the lens of sort of rebuilding after the war, and the central character that we follow through the film is very much going through this post-war trauma and attempting to rebuild his life and his sort of regrets through the war. It's a great setup, I think. It's a great and clear, concise premise to build your Godzilla film from, and the first act of this film, I really loved the way that it builds all those pieces. It sets up its characters in a sort of no-nonsense way, in a clear way, so we're able to get on board with the motivations and also the emotions behind the character, of which there are quite a lot of kind of darker and impactful themes there. It's delivered in a really kind of earnest and sincere way, but also a very, you know, typically over-the-top way, as you'd come to expect from a big Godzilla film anyway. There are really great, efficient sort of montages in the film, which I think, you know, done anywhere else might have come off as just a bit too rich and over the top. I think certainly if this had been done by a Western director that didn't quite fully understand what he was doing here, I could picture it definitely coming off as just eye-rollingly cliche and tongue-in-cheek. But Yamazaki brings this kind of sincerity to it all, which I think is why it's able to get away with being as over the top as it is. And also, you know, I'm not naive to the fact that this is a Japanese production, and there are definite sort of different cultural ways through narratives when it comes to that side of the world and the West as we have over here. I don't want to suggest though that it's doing a huge amount of really deep introspective new stuff thematically as a film, and I don't really mean that to come off as much of a negative as it's sounding as I'm saying it, but yeah, I want to be clear that it definitely is still just a Godzilla film with some nice richer stuff around it and some good character work, but it isn't reinventing the wheel, and it isn't doing anything particularly groundbreaking or deep on too many different levels. But it's a Godzilla film. I think we come for big smashy fun, and if we can get it, you know, a decent storyline to go with it with characters we care about. And I do think Godzilla -1 overall does a good job with that. But I think actually it's kind of the aesthetic formal aspects of the film that ended up standing out a lot more to me and making me appreciate a lot more about it. And maybe that's why I was able to forgive some of the more typically cliche and conventional stuff that's going on in the film. That is absolutely going on in the film. Because the way this thing looks and the way this thing sounds, just fantastic. And, you know, there's been a lot spoken about and said about the budget of this thing and how it's able to stretch its budget further than you'd expect it to. That is absolutely true. This thing looks and sounds massive, huge, and it isn't really a huge film, especially in its kind of scope. But I think Yamazaki does a fantastic job and has a very clear knowledge of how to make his film feel bigger than it actually is when it comes down to it, right? The big set pieces are scattered throughout the film in a very intentional way to make it feel bigger than it actually is, at least when it comes to budget and when it comes to, you know, the big scope of characters. And all of the big Zilla moments in there, of which there are a few, definitely do land and are really, really great. And part of the reason why they always land, not just because it looks good and, you know, the CGI is holding up and Godzilla's looking like a big chunky boy like we want from him, but it's also the way that sound is used to convey certain things in the film. I think sound is always a crucial element. Love films that use silence to their advantage. Check, this is one of those. There's some really great moments which might have been scored, you know, to the max in other cases, but here aren't quite scored to that level, and I quite like that. It's nice. It lets you sit with moments where you need to sit with moments, especially in the Godzilla attacks. Every time the atomic breath was used, what good lord. On the flip side of that, I do think there are elements of the film, moments of the film, where it has a tendency to lean a little bit too far into that side of things. Having just said that, that's a great benefit of the film. But I think it sort of lacks a little punch in places where I would have liked to have seen it have a bit more punch. There's one particular sort of sea chase moment, which was a great sequence, but I couldn't quite pin exactly why it wasn't delivering the energy that I think it wanted to be delivering in that moment. And I think what it is that it does a lot of things to create a very sort of slow and towering Godzilla, right? But that can sometimes come through in the edit in a way which just makes sequences feel a little bit clunkier than they maybe should be feeling. But honestly, it's so much fun overall, and I genuinely did care about these characters enough to feel genuine tension in all of the moments when you needed to feel genuine tension, and to feel genuine catharsis in all the moments, particularly towards the latter half of the film, where you need to feel genuine catharsis. Good stuff. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Very much looking forward to watching it again. I think it will become a good monster movie edition for the old kicking back on the sofa with a takeout watching a Zilla film. But what about you guys? Have you seen Godzilla -1? Have you seen it while it's been out in cinemas? I think pretty much everywhere. I don't know every country's cinema release dates. It's certainly out over here in the UK, so if you had a chance to check out the film, let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. We'll have a little chat. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see me talk about more shit, please do go ahead and click subscribe. The button is down there for that, as well as links to my socials. Bunch more reviews coming very soon, as well as a fun Christmas ditty that's coming out, so yeah, good times on the channel. I will see you guys very, very soon for some more thoughts on more films, but until next time, yeah, whoever Godzilla's maths teacher is, probably very chuffed. More maths jokes. When's the square root of Godzilla coming out? I'm stopping now.